Hello and welcome. We're excited to get together today and talk a little bit about how to eliminate event headaches. This webinar is a little bit of a precursor webinar to the Elevate conference coming up July 12th and 13th. We have an incredible conference with some incredible partners planned for you. I want to thank all of our sponsors who make Elevate happen. And we want to give you a little bit of preview of what's to come with Elevate. So we have a little preview video here for you.
Unleash the power of events to energize your donors and amplify your mission. Join us at the Elevate Conference in 2025, where you'll learn the essential tools for planning a successful fundraising event. Book your tickets now for March 12th and 13th. This dynamic hybrid conference, hosted at Avenue in Portland, Oregon, and streamed live for our virtual audience, will equip you with practical tools, demos, and templates that you can put to work immediately. Don't miss out. Secure your spot today at Elevate 2025. Visit elevatenonprofit.com to register now. Elevate Conference 2025 is brought to you by Swaim Strategies and the AV Department, powered by elevatenonprofit.com.
Well, this two-day conference is a deep dive into all things fundraising. We like to say it's taking your fundraising event to school. Day one is going to be the basics that we're going to be building off of, and day two is really kind of the dynamic, deeper dive into what can really power your fundraising event. We're developing these 4 webinars. We have a total of 4 for you to enjoy before the conference as a way for you to have building blocks for you to sort of build off of. And we have some incredible speakers lined up, bringing you keynote experiences of their events, what they're doing that's working, tools that you can apply. All of our expert speakers are bringing panel discussions to the table and a ton of resources. So we hope that you will scan that QR code and join us at Elevate. And if you're already registered for Elevate, we're very excited to see you there. And we want to remind you that we have our podcast available to you, the Fundraising Elevator, as a free resource every day that you can find discussions and deep dives with experts about what's working in the fundraising world. Speaking of experts, I've invited an expert here to join me, Mary Elizabeth with the Fundraising Event Company. Mary, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is great.
I want to dive into those sort of roadblocks that we hear so often, sort of our top 5 needs that come around how do I fix this, or what do I do to make my event better? And you and I chatted a little bit beforehand to talk about what were sort of those 5 easy buttons that kind of hang folks up and sort of prohibit that great guest experience. A little bit about what we're going to talk about today. We want to dive into those sort of 5 elements that show up most often: timing, planning your event, staging, preparing your guests, no line registrations, which seems to be the biggest one that we come across, and then how to create a powerful program and when to hire professional support for your fundraising event.
Yeah, I can't wait to share more.
A quick little reminder about why fundraising events, especially right now, right? Like we're sitting here in this weird time that we're watching headlines and getting news every day that's incredibly scary. And I think we're trying to figure out how to move forward in our planning and how to move forward with our fundraising events. And I want to remind everyone that it's about more than just that revenue. The revenue is important right now, incredibly important, but all social justice movements are built on gathering. And the reason why gathering is so impactful is because it helps us to feel a sense of being part of something bigger than ourselves, and to feel sort of that sense of recognition that we are moving things forward and creating and manifesting the world we want to see and making a difference in the world. And fundraising events allow us to mobilize people in that way. And it can be an incredibly powerful thing to create change, and change is something we really need right now. So let's tackle those 5 things and see if we can just help folks have some basics to build off of.
Let's do it.
All right. So talk to me a little bit about timing. This is something we come up against all the time. Is we get a call from someone and says, our fundraising event is next week or next month. And so I want to know from you, Mary, you spend your time deep in the weeds of how to really execute an incredible event. So how much time does it really take to plan a successful gala or fundraising event?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what you want to do is really start at least 10 to 12 months before your event begins. And really, if you've just finished an event, go ahead and start planning for your next event. And the reason for this is that you really want to get some of the key elements locked in, your key vendors, which is your venue, your auctioneer, and your date basically is what you want to do is hone in on that date and get those key vendors confirmed on the date that you want. Sometimes it takes a little bit to get those three on a path that's like the right one, but that's why you want to start early. You also want to get into your sponsors' budget plans, so you want to start
Yeah.
solicitation early as well. So some organizations, some companies require that you ask them for solicitations 12 months before your event begins, within like the January before the next year, or um, that's where the relationship comes in. And that's where you want to be in relationship with your sponsors so that you understand what their budget cycles are and you can go to them at the right time. More time, the better. You also want to be able to have time to develop your program. What's going to happen on your stage at your event? You want to think about who's speaking. What stories are you gathering in advance in order to make the most impact at your event? And also planning for those videos to be created. Those videos can sometimes take upwards of 3 months in advance to gather your assets and get the B-roll and get all the interviews scheduled and done. So having that time frame is really helpful and will just bring your stress level down. In addition to that, you want to talk to your major donors and figure out how they want to be part of your event. Do they want to buy a table? Do they want to give during the paddle raise? Do they want to raise their paddle at a specific level? Being in relationship to those donors in advance, where you're not just asking every time you meet with them, but that you really are in relationship that you can have some really good timing around that. 10 to 12 months is a great time. And it just makes changes easier to manage. Like, as the event comes up, things are going to be thrown at you. Something will happen in the world that you want to be relevant at your event. You want to throw something into your speech. If you've done all that planning in advance, you have time to be able to manage some of those last minute elements that come through.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think the importance of having a couple key things in place in time for you to get ahead of budget cycles for your sponsors is one of the biggest areas that I see folks trying to catch up on. And it's just an area
Mhm.
you can't catch up on. If you haven't secured your sponsors and you're out of their budget cycle, it's time to talk about next year
Yep,
because
it's true.
you just can't get, a decision from a sponsor 30 days before your event.
Absolutely.
So time is a big one. Let's talk about staging. So staging is a concept that was presented to us originally by Paul Zak. Paul Zak is a social science researcher who talks about the importance of people feeling prepared to participate in an event. And
Mhm.
this is a big one where I feel like staging kind of comes in multiple forms. And you all have at the fundraising event company a best practice about communicating some things in advance. So,
Mhm.
can you tell us about how you prepare your guests in advance and get them ready to be at the event?
Yeah, well, it almost starts even before that. So it actually starts the very first minute that you start promoting your event. So, these might be prospective guests, right? So you want to just start with your invitation, with your save the date. That's when you start that feeling of like, what's this event going to be like? But then once you have your guest list, something that we provide all of our clients is we call it a pre-event attendee communication. And this is going to go out to every guest or even the table hosts of your sponsors. I know it's sometimes hard to gather those guest names. And so if you don't have those guest names in advance, um, you know, you want to give it to the table host in order to communicate that to the folks coming. And it's a communication that includes everything you might want to know to be prepared and ready to show up at that event. This is really important because this helps them feel like they're expected, that all attendees are expected, and that they belong
Yeah.
at your event. So things like, what am I supposed to wear? What time should I be there? Will there be dinner? Will there be food? Will there be snacks? Where do I park? How do I participate at the event? What kinds of activities will there be? You can have some. You don't want to give it all away, right? There'll be some surprise and delight happening, but you want to give enough information to make the guests that are arriving feel expected and feel like they can participate without worrying about, oh my gosh, I had to park so far away and I didn't know what time to be here, and oh shoot, I ate before I came, but there's this three-course dinner now. So it just really helps prepare your guests and make them feel like they belong.
I think when guests feel unprepared, it's really hard to get them involved, right? That like
Mm.
I recently was with some friends and they were telling me the story of going to an event Halloween weekend and showing up for the event, and they were the only two people in a costume, and they had
Oh no.
assumed because it was Halloween that it was a costumed event, and they left,
Yes.
right? Like they clearly
Yeah.
felt like they didn't belong. So
Yeah.
that idea of helping people understand what to expect, I also think it's really important to help people understand that it's a fundraising event.
Mm-hmm.
You include in a lot of your communications, join us for this event that will be supporting this cause, fundraising event for, so that every communication from that very start, that first communication is clear. The worst is when folks think that they're coming to a great party and then they're asked for money and they're not prepared that this is a benefit. So I
Yeah.
think that's a key one. But it
Part of
doesn't go ahead.
part of our communication also has a section in there that says you will be asked for your credit card to start a tab for the event. So it primes them for being that's what they're going to expect.
I noticed at your events too, a lot of people come with their credit card, like they're in
Yep.
line holding their credit card ready
Yep.
to pre-run it.
Absolutely. They're like trained. They're like, I know this is what this is about.
Well, staging I think happens too when the guests arrive. It's not just that communication
Yep.
beforehand, but I think we can like help usher folks into the event well. So, what are some of the things that you put in place logistically to make sure that folks like come in ready to participate?
Yep. So there's something that happens even before guests arrive, and that is before the event, you want to gather the information that you need. So, guest names, emails, making sure that you have who is at what table and preparing your database for that. That really helps with the process. But at the event, once guests are arriving, there's a few things you want to put in place to help them continue to feel like they're part of the event. The first thing they'll see, hopefully, is some clear signage. Something that says, this is the event, here's the event branding. Oh, I recognize the logo of your organization. This way, park over here, go this way to the doors. And then they go into the doors, and there's greeters there saying, welcome to big party event for XYZ organization. You're in the right place. Thank you for being here. And the greeters really usher them into where am I supposed to go? And they say, right over here to registration. And it's just like they're met with something, the guest is met with something that allows them to feel a part of it at every step of the way. So they see the signage, then they see the greeters, and then they're into registration. And then they go into the event, maybe to a reception. And what you want to do is have some of your folks at your organization, board members, staff, really acting as hosts to welcome folks in, maybe even give them some assignments of like, these folks are coming. Can you go say hi to Susan and make sure that they feel welcomed? And that way they're not standing in the corner of the reception drinking a drink by themselves or with their partner, but they're really welcomed in every step of the way.
You had an event last year that was at a casino, and as I approached, I thought, oh my gosh, I have no idea. I've never been in this venue. I don't know where I'm going. And I was so pleasantly surprised to see that there was a clear path and signage all through the casino. And that can be overwhelming, right? Like people are gaming, there's bells ringing, but it
Yep.
was really clear where to go.
Yeah.
And made it nice and easy to participate in. So I think that can be a way that we either have our guests arrive in a good mood or a bad mood really quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't want them coming and being like, I'm leaving because I'm exhausted and I don't know where to go and I couldn't find parking or all of that stuff makes a huge difference. It's small, but it makes a difference.
Well, you mentioned getting everyone's names, and I think that that leads us to the registration question. So,
Yeah.
our third sort of easy button is to make sure that you have a registration with no lines. This is the number one thing that we get calls about. You are the expert when it comes to a seamless registration experience. So, what are easy ways to make sure that it's smooth?
Yeah, there's a ton of small tips that can have that I can give you that will really make your registration smooth. So, like I said before, confirming all your guest names from your sponsors and table hosts. We talk about it as shaking the trees. the week before your event, the 2 weeks before your event, the 3 weeks before your event, getting on the phone even and calling folks, texting folks, Instagram messaging them. People are interacting in different ways these days. So email may not be working for you, but whatever is working, go there. Whatever works for them, make it easier for them. So gathering those guest names, getting them in your event database, confirming that if there's any seats that are going that the host is not using, getting verbal confirmation that they're releasing those so you can place a staff member or a volunteer in those seats. And then at the event, there's a way that you can set up your registration that will make it a lot smoother, where you have, several or 4 or 5, depending on the amount of folks attending your event. You'll have your computer stations where you're checking folks in. But then what I recommend is always having a help station that's separate off to one side, not like super separate, but like it's obvious there's signage there. It's a help station for anyone who isn't found in the system easily. So your volunteers don't have to understand, like, okay, you have to do this and this in order to switch that person around. All those folks can just go to the help station, and the help station person will be equipped to understand where open seats are, or groups where people are switching people out, and those folks can be helped over there while the rest of the people can just go through the line just like normal. In addition to that, you're going to want to have some greeters helping sort of manage the line or manage the area of registration, so that if the lines get unruly, or if, hopefully that won't happen, but if it's unclear how to get to a open registration station, the greeter can direct the attendee. And then the people at the computers will check the folks in, and then you have some additional, uh, we call them bid card runners, standing behind the computer operators, whose job it is to just simply grab the bid card that's assigned to them in numerical order and hand it to the guest. And it makes it very smooth. Boop, boop, boop. Here's the system. And then finally, I know that sometimes when you're gathering guest names from table hosts, you may not have contact information for these folks, and you want to gather their address or their email or their phone number. And sometimes when they're in the line and the volunteer is trying to gather that in the moment, it takes a long time to do that. So what I recommend instead is using your event software to see if there's missing information or not. And then the volunteer can just simply give them a form, just a small form to fill out at the end of their transaction. They say, "Oh, it looks like we don't have information for you. Can you please take this form and step over here to this table where there's pens and a little box, where they'll fill that out over to the side. That will then just make that line go smoothly. It takes about 60 seconds. If you use this system, it takes about 60 seconds to get someone checked in this way. If you have them in the system, even if you have missing information for them, they can fill out the form, drop it in the box at that table, and then that data entry can be done by the volunteers after everyone gets into the event.
Yeah, this is a setup that I feel like we've seen a lot of people try a lot of different ways. And every single time your setup is, I think, the one that like moves people through the fastest. And
Yeah.
the help station is just such a key critical piece, because when you're training a volunteer on site, you want them to be able to do the most with the least amount of training and information,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And the fastest way to do that is to have the person who understands the database and who's been taking all the calls and understands like who's coming
Hmm.
at that help station, so that all they have to deal with are the folks that are already registered, entered, assigned tables, that it's nice and smooth and easy. And the second they run into a question or a, challenge, they don't have to hold up the line. They just move them over
Yeah.
to the station where the expert is. And I feel like that is just like the number one thing every
Yeah.
time, is that
That's what holds it up, honestly. I've been
every
at
time.
events where there's not help stations, and it's very frustrating for the guest, and the guest is mad, and we have to smooth things over, and it's like we can eliminate that
It's also
with the help
frustrating for the
station.
volunteer, right? Like
Yeah,
they suddenly feel like they're unequipped to be able to
I know.
answer.
I don't know where an open seat is. Where do they sit? Yeah,
Well, and
exactly.
that open seat grid, like that is the magic that I think you walk into your events knowing
Mm-hmm.
who's in the room at every table and where a seat has been released.
Yep.
a bank bought that table. They get 10 seats, but they only gave you 8 names. Are they bringing 2 people? Are they not? Do we hold
Mhm.
it as the guest of the bank and wait for
Yep.
those folks to arrive, or do we release it and seat other people there? That is always the like hang up spot. And I think you've done a beautiful job of not just having a help station to move folks to, but also
Mhm.
making sure that the person at the help station has a
Yeah.
really easy answer of, oh, you're guest of the bank. We were expecting you. Let me get your
Mhm.
information. Or we have 2 seats open because the bank's not sending anyone is a key piece to the fact that you're able to like really move people through that quickly.
I always create a cheat sheet for that station because it's like I know where the seats are, but I don't want to shuffle through a whole bunch of paperwork
Yeah.
to figure it out. So I just say like 2 seats available, and then I like draw lines and like fill in the name
Fill
as
them
it
in.
goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I
So
think we've noticed in the past year that time and attention is short. And so our fourth element to a really great sort of successful event is that short, powerful program.
yeah.
What are your top tips for making sure that a program is really impactful?
Yeah, you can absolutely have an impactful program, even if it's super short. It should be no longer than 60 to 90 minutes. We're really seeing a folks' attention span just we want to honor people's time, right?
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that we're getting our message across in an impactful way. And so there's some tips that we can do in order to do that. So number one, seat your guests. What this means is um, if you put your guests in a seat and they're seated, and then the lights go down, and then the stage lights go up, and someone starts speaking, automatically they know what to do. They've been to a movie theater, they've been to a concert or something where that's a social cue for them to stop and listen. Even if they're eating food, they will stop and listen. And then you can be able to deliver your program to an audience who is attentive. Another tip is to always use an MC. This MC is helpful for stitching together your program and helping give verbal cues to the rest of your speakers to come up to stage and leave stage or thank them for speaking. It's a way to really just create smooth transitions during your program and to
Yeah.
keep it going. So for instance, if you're going long or something, your MC could speed up a little bit and say, it's a way to really help with your entire program's length. We also always recommend scripting every word.
Mhm.
So this may end up being a little bit more work for you, but instead of giving bullet points or like an outline, really give yourself a scripted to the word um, script. We always use a podium script that has tabs for every speaker so that if someone gets lost, they can find their name and flip to their section. And this just allows, if you know what's being said, you know that your program is going to be impactful. That doesn't mean that there can't be ad libs or natural additions that make sense in the moment. That's what the MC can do if if they have a connection to the program or if they have a connection, they've rehearsed it. But scripting to that word is really going to allow you to say what you want to say in the amount of time you want to say it in.
Yeah.
Telling your story is something it seems obvious, like tell your story, of course. But really you want to make sure that your attendees leave the event understanding what you do.
Yeah.
It's the worst when you go to an event, you're like, I don't even know what that I mean, we raised money for a cool program, I think, but I'm not really sure what they do. So figure out how to tell your story in a succinct way that comes across. You can use video for this. You can use your executive director, though sometimes we pair that together to really create an understanding of what your story is. So you can show and you can tell with show with a video, tell with your executive director. So that's one way to tell your story. And then finally, that sort of leads me to following an event arc. So when folks come to any event, we know through science that there's something natural that's going to happen energy wise as soon as someone arrives, goes through your program, and leaves the event. There's a point at the top, naturally, it's going to happen no matter what you do. There's a point in the middle, maybe in its hour to your program, maybe it's 30 minutes into your program, where they sit and they go, okay, I think I'm done. I want to go home now. And so that energy level of engagement, it lifts, it lifts, it lifts. And then they get to that tipping point of, okay, I'm tired. I want to go home. There's a natural event arc that happens physically. So we've created, and Sam's going to talk a little bit about this briefly, an event arc that we found that really works, that follows that natural ebb right here into 5 different sections. So,
So this is a 5 chapter strategy that Kristen Steele is doing a whole webinar on. So I'll plug Kristen's webinar for folks to be able to develop their program out of this. But I think one of the challenges we see most often is that folks wait till that tipping point and ask for money at the end of the event or when folks are ready to leave. And it never feels great. But when you lean into that natural group dynamic and you like take advantage of the energy and the momentum, it can be so powerful for your fundraising. So be sure to check out the webinar about the fundraising event arc with Kristen. She dives into this really to help you shape your program and better understand how your program can have impact. But to your point, Mary, about telling your story, it may seem so obvious, but I do think that this is something that when we're in the work so often as organizations, we assume people know what we do.
mhm,
And I think that we put together these incredible events and we forget to leave people with an understanding of who we are and what we do.
yeah.
So I think that it's an important element. So important that Kristen's going to do her own webinar. And so we'll make sure that there's a link to that so you can get to the event art from there. Well, the last sort of key thing I think is important is to understand when it's valuable to bring in professional help for your fundraising
Mhm,
event. And
mhm.
I want to give you a little bit of a plug here because the fundraising event company is a subsidiary of our work at Swing Strategies. And Mary has been leading the team there in execution of events, how to really help organizations get into the details and execute a flawless event. You work with so many great vendor partners all the
Mhm.
time and are collaborating with nonprofits about what are the pieces of their puzzle that they need support on. So I wanted to help you or ask you, what is the help, who are the experts that make the biggest impact?
Yeah, this is a great question, because it can often seem like decor might be the most impactful, and oftentimes it's just not. So let me talk about a few things that are the most impactful professional support folks that you can hire. Number one is AV. If the audience can't hear what's happening on stage in your program, they will tune out and they will not understand who you are, what you're doing, and they'll just be going to a fun party and eating dinner and chatting with friends. So AV is super important to hire someone really good. We have amazing partners, but AV is a great number one thing to really invest in. Number two, an auctioneer or fundraising host. Now, an auctioneer or fundraising host is someone trained in the art of fundraising at events. And so, if you hire a professional here instead of using maybe a volunteer or a board member or someone from your organization, it can turn your donations into a so much more opportunity for you. Auctioneers can be strategic. There's no awkward moments of um, during the collection. There's no time. They make everyone feel really comfortable. They make people feel recognized. So it's a really strategic moment that you can invest in for your event to take your fundraising to the next level. This really helps. The ROI on this is just fantastic. I know folks who've gone from not using one to using one, and it pays for itself and more. So this is a really important aspect of your event if you want to go to the next level. And then registration. This is an area where you can save headaches for yourself. If you hire a professional, they can come in and do the hard work, and they do it all the time. I know that some of my clients, they're like, I don't even know how to use this software. I used it last year, but I forget how to use it because I use it once a year. Well, professionals are using it every day. So there's a difference there that they can help prep your event and run it for your registration time and really make a difference on that first impression that you're making on your guests. And then finally, if you are interested or you've heard the word hybrid thrown around, ever since COVID, Hybrid is used all the time, virtual. You know, once we went back into gathering, I think the virtual element of events have been um, not as utilized as they can be. I think this is a missing piece that can really elevate your presence in your community nationwide, bring people in who maybe can't get to your event. This is something that if you're able to virtually live stream your event in a thoughtful way that brings both audiences together, this is where a professional can help you because this can be tricky technology wise. Um, it's hard to understand how to bring the two audiences together. And there's some great people out there, and we've worked with many folks to help them do this. It's very confusing for the organization because they don't know how to do it. And so they just say, I don't want to do it. But this is a place that you can hire a professional and really change your impact across even more people and get your word out for your event and your organization in a really thoughtful and impactful way.
I couldn't agree more. We've been doing so many hybrid events, and this is an area where I see your team just like excel because you're able to really move the giving through
Hmm.
the home audience and get them connected and engage the home audience. Your team is so good at making sure that there's integration of a script that really integrates the in person and the home audience. So it's an incredible thing to see when done well,
Yeah.
but can be, like you said,
Yeah.
intimidating for sure.
Yes.
Well, so to wrap it up, I think one of the things we wanted to just impress for folks is the importance of making sure some of those harder things are made easy for your guests. And there's some sort of quick, easy buttons we can hit, and that is give yourself enough time. Don't wait. It happens all the time that we're pushing toward, we'll respond when we have to. But if you get ahead of it, it's a really easy way to get off the hamster wheel and be more responsive. Prepare your guests so that they're ready to give, they're ready to support, they feel comfortable. Make sure that when they arrive, there's no lines, that registration is easy. And if you need support with that, we encourage you to reach out to either one of us, and we'll help you
Mhm.
figure out what the best solution is. Um, we recommend a tight, short, powerful program that focuses on your mission and your story. That is what people are there to support. And finally, engage experts when you need help. If you're up against it and you don't have the answers, there are lots of people that do, and there are going to be a lot of people at the Elevate conference that have the answers. So we hope that you'll join us March 12th and 13th of 2025. Tune in virtually if you're not able to join us in person, or join us in person at Avenue. We have dozens of speakers that are bringing tons of expertise and best practices, as well as just a responsiveness to what's happening right now and how the world is changing around us. So Mary, thank you to you and your team for what you bring to the table. I'm so excited to have you all at Elevate this year. And thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.